Some of the most frustrating crisis calls are the ones that just won't go the way you think they should. Every turn feels like a dead end or a step backward. And that frustration can change how you communicate, affect your patients, and make it harder to move the conversation forward. In today's video, I'm going to show you 2 ways expectations can quietly derail a crisis call and what you can do to keep them from getting in the way. One of the biggest sources of frustration on a crisis call is expectations. The problem is that we often don't recognize the role they're playing until they're already affecting the conversation. Let me show you 2 ways expectations can quietly get in the way. The first way has to do with our own expectations. We all walk into calls carrying assumptions about how things are going to go. And sometimes we've already convinced ourselves the person needs help and expect them to see it the same way. Other times, we're expecting them to agree with the solution we're offering or cooperate once we've explained their options. And let's be honest, there's days when we've got calls waiting and we just really like this call wrapped up quickly. But then reality hits. The person sees things differently than we do. And what seems obvious to us isn't for them. Things that we think are urgent may not really be that important to them. And that's usually when frustration starts creeping in. I believe that frustration often occurs in the gap between what we want to happen and what's actually happening. The larger that gap becomes, the more likely we are to lose patience, get more authoritative, and start pushing harder. When that happens, we're no longer responding to the reality as much as we're responding to the difference between reality and how we think things should be. The second way expectations create problems for us is all about the expectations of the person in crisis. Nobody meets us as a blank slate. They're bringing a lifetime of experiences, beliefs, and assumptions with them. If they've had negative experiences with police before, they may expect this interaction to go badly before we've even said a single word. If they've spent years feeling judged, ignored, or disrespected, they may assume that's exactly what's about to happen again. Those expectations become a filter. So our attempts to help may feel controlling to them. A reasonable question might feel intrusive, and a very neutral comment could be interpreted as criticism. In other words, we're not just dealing with the situation in front of us. We're also dealing with the expectations they've already brought into it. And if we don't recognize those expectations, we can end up creating resistance without ever understanding where it's coming from. So, what do we do about it? The first thing is recognize when your expectations aren't lining up with reality. When you find yourself becoming frustrated, ask whether the problem really is the other person or whether you're becoming too attached to how you think the situation should be. One of the most important mindset shifts you can make on crisis calls is moving from should to is. Instead of focusing on how the situation should be, focus on the reality you're actually dealing with and adjust your expectations accordingly. The second thing we can do is pay attention to the expectations of the person in crisis. If you can identify those expectations early and either address them or work within them, you'll often reduce resistance before it becomes a problem. Now, just a quick clarification. The point of this video is not that every expectation can or should be adjusted to fit what the other person wants. There are times when reality is reality. If someone meets the criteria for an emergency psychiatric evaluation, they're probably going to go to the hospital whether they agree with it or not. In that situation, our expectation that they're going to the hospital may be completely aligned with reality. The question is whether our expectations about everything else are aligned with reality. Are we expecting them to immediately understand what we're telling them? Are we expecting them to agree with the decision? Are we expecting cooperation just because we've explained what's happening? Those are the kind of expectations that often create frustration. When we're realistic about what's likely to happen and how the person may respond, we're usually in a much better position to manage the conversation and reduce unnecessary resistance. All right, here's the takeaway for today. When expectations and reality don't match, frustration usually follows. So, align your expectations with reality, pay attention to the expectations of the other person, and adjust your approach accordingly. That's how you can reduce your frustration and their resistance, so you can move the conversation forward more effectively. If you'd like to learn more about identifying and addressing the concerns a person may be bringing into a crisis call, check out my video on addressing the elephant in the room. Just click on the thumbnail above. And be sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any future crisis intervention tips. Because crisis is difficult. It doesn't have to be complicated.